I, a 28-year-old man, went from being the family's cash machine to the one who dismantled their world and walked away without a care. Let me introduce my family. My 52-year-old father, Carl, a self-proclaimed ruler, and his 25-year-old favorite son, Ethan. These two turned our home into their personal fiefdom, with me as the serf bankrolling their existence. Carl once worked in construction until my mother, Sophia, moved to Germany for a nursing job when I was 16. When her paychecks started arriving, Carl promptly retired his hammer. His reasoning: why toil when Sophia's got us covered from abroad? I'll never forget the day I came home from school at 2 p.m. to find Carl tossing his work boots into the garbage while cracking open a beer in celebration. On a Tuesday. "Your dad's done working, Nathan," he announced, as if he'd hit the jackpot instead of choosing to leech. "It's time for you to step up for this family." I was just 16, but Carl had already decided my life would revolve around funding his delusions of grandeur. Carl wasn't satisfied with merely being idle. He craved control. Every household choice was his to make: what we ate, what TV channels we watched, who got to use the car, even when the heater was turned on. It was classic small man syndrome, micromanaging every detail to feel powerful. Then there was Ethan, my younger brother, Carl's carbon copy. At 25, he behaved like a perpetual teenager, convinced the world owed him everything. While I slaved away at factory shifts, Ethan perfected his gaming skills and mastered the art of whining to anyone who suggested he get a job. He worked maybe 15 hours a week at a knockoff video game store, spending every cent on energy drinks, weed, and flashy sneakers to mask his lack of ambition. The rest of his time was spent holed up in his room, playing online shooters and yelling at preteens through his headset. He'd stay up until 4 a.m., then sleep until mid-afternoon, complaining about exhaustion from his grueling schedule of doing nothing productive. Carl called this Ethan finding his calling, as if being a professional letdown was a legitimate career. Our house was a crumbling ranch-style dump with a sagging foundation and pipes that groaned like tortured spirits every time someone flushed. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and the constant stench of Carl's entitlement mixed with Ethan's energy drink fumes. Carl ruled from his throne, a ratty recliner with permanent butt dents. From there he'd bark orders, criticize my every move, and remind me I owed him for the roof over my head. The worst part? I bought into it. When Mom left, she pulled me aside and said, "Look after your father and brother, Nathan. You're the man of the house now, don't let them down." Carl made sure I knew the pecking order. He was the king, Ethan the prince, and I was the fool tasked with financing their fun. When I dared suggest Ethan get a real job or Carl pitch in, Carl would shut me down with, "You live under my roof, you follow my rules." Never mind that I was paying for that roof, the rules, and everything else keeping their sorry lives afloat. Carl had a knack for making you feel absurd for expecting basic respect. He'd twist every conversation to make you the villain. He knew exactly how to guilt-trip me into sacrificing everything for them. Ethan, ever the quick study, picked up the same trick, making any reasonable request sound outrageous. For years, I believed this was normal, that family meant being everyone else's fix for their self-inflicted problems. Wanting to keep some of my earnings, that made me selfish. It didn't. And they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. At 19, I landed a job at a metal fabrication plant 30 minutes from town. 8 hours of slicing steel, welding brackets, and slowly losing my hearing in a factory stuck in the 1970s. The pay was steady, though, and someone had to keep Carl's kingdom from collapsing. The plant's manager, Mike, was a no-nonsense old-timer who'd been there since the place opened. On my first week, he pulled me aside and said, "Kid, I can tell the workers from the clock punchers." "Which one are you?" I told him I needed the job too badly to slack off. He nodded and said, "Good, because clock punchers don't last here and I can spot them a mile away." Mike became my unofficial mentor, showing me that respect was earned through effort, not groveling or scheming. Every payday, Carl was there, hand outstretched, not requesting but demanding. After my first paycheck, he cornered me and laid out the rules of his domain. "Your money goes into the family fund," he said, like he was teaching a toddler basic arithmetic. "I decide how it's spent. Rent, bills, food, everything. Want to spend something? Ask me." Ask him for my own hard-earned cash. Carl had this infuriating payday ritual that still makes my blood boil. He'd sit at the kitchen table with a calculator, a notepad, and a smug grin, acting like some Wall Street genius. "Let's see what the family brought in this week," he'd say, as if he'd contributed a dime. Then he'd list every expense, real or made up, while I stood there like a kid getting a lecture about pocket money. Rent, utilities, groceries, and miscellaneous household costs, which always covered his booze and Ethan's latest gaming gear. But it wasn't just about taking my money. Carl gave Ethan an allowance, treating him like a middle schooler, while he controlled the bank account where my checks went, decided what groceries we bought, and whether I could replace my hole-ridden work boots. Every weekend, Carl handed Ethan $50 for being a good kid, while I had to beg for basic hygiene products. Ethan's household contribution, taking out the trash, but only if Carl explicitly told him to. Cooking, cleaning, and yard work, all on me. Ethan was 25, old enough to know how to scrub a plate, but the double standard was a daily slap in the face. Ethan could sleep till noon, leave dirty dishes everywhere, and treat the house like his personal dorm room, while I was held to drill sergeant standards. I had a curfew at 22, but Ethan could stumble in at 3 a.m., reeking of cheap pot with zero consequences. When I pointed out the hypocrisy, Carl's excuse was, "You're the responsible one, act like it." Translation: Ethan gets to stay a kid forever while you play parent to both of them. Weekends were the worst. Carl's buddies, jobless middle-aged guys who treated day drinking like a career, would invade our backyard, down a case of beer, and pontificate like they had all the answers. I'd come home from overtime to find these paragons of wisdom passed out in lawn chairs while Carl played budget mob boss. Ethan would sometimes join them, trying to act like one of the gang. Nothing sadder than a 25-year-old trying to impress his dad's deadbeat friends with tales of his gaming victories. Carl made me feel guilty for wanting anything for myself, constantly weaponizing Mom's words. "Your mother trusted you to take care of us. Are you going to disappoint her? Are you that kind of son?" Ethan played the same card. If I asked him to do anything, he'd run to Carl, whining that I was mean or bullying him. Carl would instantly take his side, saying Ethan was going through a rough patch and needed support, not pressure. The guy lived rent-free, ate food he didn't buy, and had zero responsibilities. Tough life. But I kept grinding, convincing myself it was temporary, that Carl would eventually step up or Ethan would mature, that my sacrifices meant something. What I didn't see was that Carl loved this setup. He had a live-in ATM who paid every bill and never pushed back. Why would he change a thing? Well, he was about to find out even ATMs have limits. 3 years into the factory grind, management noticed I wasn't just going through the motions. While my coworkers mastered the art of looking busy, I was solving problems, optimizing workflows, and acting like someone who cared about results. They promoted me to floor supervisor, which came with a small raise, but more importantly, caught the eye of the higher-ups who made real decisions. Turns out I had a knack for logistics and planning. Mike saw it first. One day he called me into his office and said, "Nathan, you notice things others don't. Yesterday you caught a shipping error that would have cost us $50,000. Most guys would have just signed off and let it be someone else's mess." Mike introduced me to the operations manager, who started giving me side projects that highlighted my problem-solving skills. Within 2 years, I climbed from floor supervisor to operations management, then supply chain coordination, and finally regional logistics, each role with better pay and real respect from people who weren't my family. In 6 years, I went from grinding steel for scraps to handling multi-million-dollar contracts. My salary grew tenfold, but Carl and Ethan had no clue. I'd leave the house in the same worn-out work clothes, stop at a gas station a few miles away, and change into business casual in the bathroom. My factory job supposedly started requiring office meetings. Carl's ego couldn't handle the idea of his worker bee son outshining him, so I kept handing over the same amount every payday, equivalent to my old factory wages. I'd explain the khakis as a new dress code for those meetings. Carl would still sit in his recliner, demanding his cut with the same entitled tone. "Come on, Nathan, don't keep me waiting for the family money," he'd say, and I'd fork it over straight-faced while mentally tallying my growing savings. By year 5, I had enough to buy a house outright. By year 6, I could have lived job-free for 3 years. The toughest part wasn't hiding the money, it was watching them squander what I gave them. Carl's liquor budget alone could have funded a nice trip, and Ethan's allowance could have covered groceries for some families. My real job grew more demanding and fulfilling, but at home, I was still lectured on financial responsibility by a man whose biggest money win was cashing welfare checks. The disconnect was surreal. I'd close a deal saving the company $300,000 a year, then come home to Carl explaining why I couldn't afford new boots. Carl's control fetish made it easy to keep my secret. He never asked about my job as long as the cash flowed. He saw me as the same broke kid slaving for minimum wage. Ethan was even more clueless, thinking money just materialized, like the fairy who magically cleaned his room and did his laundry. I started traveling for work, visiting vendors, managing contracts, attending industry events. Neither of them knew the guy they treated like a servant was earning more than Carl ever had. But I kept up the act, pretending to be broke while building my escape fund, playing the loyal son while planning my freedom. The account grew, 6 figures, then 7. And for the first time since Mom left, I had real hope, backed by real money, that I could break free from these toxic leeches. What I didn't know was that my secret was about to blow up on March 12, 2024, the day my double life went up in flames. I just sealed a huge contract that saved the company $800,000 annually, and my bonus was more than Carl had earned in 5 years combined. I printed the deposit confirmation for my records, but made a fatal error. I left it on the kitchen counter. Ethan found it the next morning while rummaging for snack money. "Holy crap, Nathan," he yelled loud enough to rattle the neighbors. "Look at this freaking number." Carl came charging in like Ethan had struck gold. When he saw the slip, his face cycled through a half-dozen emotions in seconds. The silence after Ethan's outburst was heavy. Carl stood there, clutching the paper like it was a sacred relic, his jaw working soundlessly. Ethan was practically bouncing, already dreaming of spending cash that wasn't his. "Dude, this changes everything," Ethan said, voice dripping with greed. "We're freaking rich," Carl snapped out of it, gripping the paper like it proved my betrayal. "This is what they're paying you," he roared. "And you've been giving us the same pittance for years." I stayed cool. "That money's mine, Dad. I earned it. You two contribute nothing but chaos and bills." Carl's face went betrayed, the shade he hit when his authority was challenged. "Don't you dare speak to me like that. This is my house and I say how money's spent." Ethan chimed in with his usual genius. "We know how much you make, Nathan. You've been screwing us over. I want a car, a good one, and my own place. You can afford it." The entitlement was staggering, but Carl had grander plans. He sank into his recliner, laying out his new regime with the swagger of a man who'd never been denied. "Here's how it's gonna go, Nathan. You give me full access to your accounts and I'll manage the money properly. Set Ethan up for his future, make sure I'm comfortable in retirement. You'll get an allowance like Ethan. Maybe $500 a week if you behave. $500 a week from my 6-figure salary." Then Carl doubled down, reveling in his dictator fantasy. "And you're getting a local job where I can keep tabs on you. No more getting big ideas above your place. I've been too soft, and clearly you can't be trusted to make smart choices." The irony was rich. A guy who hadn't made a good call since the 90s was going to run my career. That's when I started laughing. "No way," I said. "I'm done, I'm moving out." Carl's face went from red to purple. "What the hell did you say?" As I headed to my room to pack, Carl grabbed my shoulder, spun me around, and before I could react, his fist slammed into my jaw, snapping my head back. I stumbled, tasting blood, as Carl loomed over me like a backwoods bully. "You live in my house, you follow my rules," he growled, shaking out his hand. "Now get to the kitchen and we'll talk about your new budget like adults." Ethan stood in the doorway, smirking. "Maybe next time you'll listen to Dad," he said, loving the show. I touched my swelling jaw and something inside me broke. I looked at these two, who thought violence was a fair response to my demand for dignity. "Fine," I said, standing slowly. "You want to play dirty? Let's play dirty." That night I drove to the police station, jaw throbbing, lip split. I filed an assault charge against Carl, complete with injury photos and a detailed account of years of financial control and abuse. The police were surprisingly supportive, sending 2 officers to arrest Carl that day. Ethan called me while Carl was being booked, screaming that I was tearing the family apart and demanding I drop the charges. I hung up and blocked him. Carl spent the night in lockup before making bail, then called from his lawyer's office. "Drop the charges, Nathan," he said, trying to sound calm instead of desperate. "This is family business. We don't air it in court." "Nah," I replied. "You wanted to play king, now play defendant." That's when his facade cracked and the reasonable tone gave way to rage. "You think you can destroy me? I made you." I hung up and called my lawyer. It was time to show Carl what happens when you threaten someone with better legal firepower than the overworked public defender he could barely afford. The assault charge was just the start. Carl was about to learn that bullying a guy who'd been quietly documenting financial abuse for years was a terrible move. Carl's arrest kicked off a month-long legal battle where I held all the cards, and he was stuck with a losing hand. My lawyer, Rachel Kim, was a shark in a power suit who thrived on family law and domestic abuse cases. When I showed her my records of 12 years of financial exploitation, she grinned like a kid on Christmas. He had no idea he was messing with someone with resources and nothing to lose, she said. Rachel dug into Carl's finances like a detective hunting a serial killer. Your father's facing more than assault, she said, laying out my bank statements and Carl's financial trail. Financial abuse, theft, intimidation, it's all here. Your dad's been living large for 12 years with no taxable income, she explained, pulling out spreadsheets that made Carl's budgeting look like a toddler's scribbles. The IRS doesn't like folks who live like royalty while claiming poverty. We're not just going to bury him in court, we're going to gut him financially. The assault case was ironclad. Hospital photos, police reports, neighbor statements about Carl's shouted threats. But we went further. Did he ever report the money you gave him? Rachel asked. I laughed. Carl paying taxes. The guy who thought the IRS was a hoax. No chance. He's been treating it like a gift for 12 years, Rachel said. That's massive tax evasion. I think it's time to loop in some federal contacts. While Carl dealt with his criminal charges, I had another problem. Ethan, who decided to play muscle for his dad. The harassment began the day after Carl's arrest. Ethan would cruise by my new apartment at odd hours, idling in his car like a wannabe pie. He followed me to work, the store, even the gym. Then came the texts, hundreds of them. You're done when this is over, bro. Snitches get what's coming. Dad's gonna make you pay. Watch your back. All bark, no bite, but he wasn't stopping. He started showing up at my workplace, demanding to see me until security booted him twice. My boss, Linda, a tough-as-nails woman who'd clawed her way up in a male-heavy industry, wasn't having it. Someone's trying to scare my top logistics guy? Not on my watch, she said. She brought in corporate security and legal, documenting every incident with military precision. We take care of our own, Linda told me. We don't bargain with punks who think they can intimidate our people. Having corporate muscle felt like being handed a bazooka. Then my cousin Mark stepped in, and thank God he did. Mark, 2 years older, built like a tank, was a paramedic with a gallows humor honed by years of seeing humanity's dumbest moments. We'd been tight growing up, but he lived 3 hours away, so I hadn't seen much of him during the Carl era. When I called to fill him in, his response was perfect. Hold up, Nathan. Your old man clocked you for wanting your own money, and now his other kid's playing mobster. Man, it's like a redneck soap opera over there. Mark drove down that weekend, spotted Ethan parked outside my place, and tapped on his window. Yo, budget vigilante, Mark said as Ethan rolled it down. Remember me? Your cousin who did 4 years in the army before saving lives? Guess what I learned? Ethan shook his head, probably petrified. I know how to make someone vanish without a trace, or keep them alive while wishing they weren't. So here's the deal. Stop this stalker crap, or I'll show you what a real threat feels like. Ethan peeled out and didn't come back for 3 days. Mark helped me catalog every harassment incident. Texts, voicemails, Ethan's uninvited appearances. Your brother's handing us a restraining order on a silver platter, Mark said, snapping a pic of Ethan's latest threat. Kid's too dumb to see he's building our case. He was right. Ethan's antics set up the next move. A restraining order to keep both Carl and Ethan away from me, my home, and my job. The hearing was a thing of beauty. Carl showed up in a borrowed suit, trying to look dignified, while Ethan rocked a hoodie, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. My evidence was overwhelming. Months of threatening messages, photos of Ethan tailing me, witness statements from neighbors and coworkers. The judge granted the order in 5 minutes flat. Mr. Carl, Mr. Ethan, the judge said, eyeing them like they were a bad smell. No contact with the petitioner, no calls, no texts, no showing up at his home or work. Carl's face was priceless. A man who'd controlled my life for years, now barred from even texting me. The best was yet to come. Rachel had been building her case against Carl, and she was ready to unleash it. Your dad's trial is next month, she told me post-hearing. Assault, financial abuse, tax evasion. He's about to learn that threatening someone with legal muscle isn't the same as bullying a broke kid with no options. Carl's trial was a dream come true. Rachel crafted a case that exposed him as a financial vampire who'd bled his own son dry for over a decade. Watching this wannabe tyrant squirm in the defendant's chair, while a prosecutor tore his life apart was better than any holiday. The prosecution laid it all bare. 12 years of siphoning my wages while contributing nothing. 12 years of manipulation and control. 12 years of dodging taxes on money he essentially stole. Carl's public defender looked like he wanted to crawl under the desk. The prosecution's case was a demolition derby. Bank records showing Carl's zero income, proof of his lavish lifestyle, witness accounts of his bullying tactics, and a recorded jail call where he threatened me for pressing charges. That call was gold, Carl's voice, clear as day, vowing to make me regret seeking justice. "I made you, and I can break you just as easy," he said. The jury looked at him like he was roadkill. Ethan sat in the gallery, trying to look loyal but mostly looking terrified. Mark, beside me, kept whispering commentary that nearly made me lose it. "Your dad looks like he's gonna crap himself," he muttered during a brutal cross-examination. Carl taking the stand was a disaster for him. He tried to spin 12 years of financial abuse as teaching responsibility and claimed hitting me was just fatherly discipline. The prosecutor tore him apart. "Mr. Carl, your son was 28 when you struck him. How is that discipline?" Carl mumbled. "He was living in my house following my rules." "He paid the mortgage on that house," the prosecutor shot back. "Your rules were funded by his income." Carl's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Carl had all but admitted to financial abuse in front of the jury. They deliberated for under 2 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing 3 weeks later, Rachel submitted a victim impact statement detailing the toll of 12 years of abuse. Financial, emotional, psychological. Carl got 18 months in state prison, 5 years probation, and a court-ordered restitution of $180,000, calculated as the excess he'd taken over fair household contributions. The kicker, the tax evasion conviction. The IRS was thrilled to nail Carl for 12 years of unreported income. Mr. Carl owes roughly $347,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest, the IRS agent said, flipping through his file like it was a menu. Given his financial situation and earning potential, we'll garnish his wages for life. She glanced up, almost smirking. He'll be paying until he's gone. Ethan's reaction to Carl's conviction was to crank up the harassment. The restraining order didn't faze him. He started using burner phones for threatening texts and got his gamer buddies to leave anonymous voicemails. Mark and I documented it all, screenshots, recordings, witness statements. Ethan was building a felony harassment case for us. The second restraining order hearing was even sweeter than the first. Ethan showed up solo, representing himself with the legal savvy of a potato. He told the judge, "My brother destroyed our family. My dad's in jail because of him. I'm allowed to be mad." The judge stared at him like he'd confessed to arson. "You're entitled to your feelings, Mr. Ethan," she said. "You're not entitled to stalk or threaten anyone." Ethan got 6 months in county jail for criminal stalking and a 5-year extended restraining order. Mark summed it up best as we left the courthouse. "The hilarious part? These morons could have let you walk away quietly, could have gotten jobs, learned to be adults. Instead, they chose to crash and burn." He wasn't wrong. Carl's prison commissary account is garnished monthly for restitution, and whatever work Ethan scrapes together goes the same way. Watching them face consequences was worth every cent of my legal fees. But the real payoff was still coming. 2 years later, I'm writing this from the deck of my new house, not a rental, a proper home. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, attached garage, and a backyard with only my beer cans. The fallout from Carl and Ethan's legal implosion was even sweeter than I'd hoped. Carl served his full 18 months and came out to find his kingdom foreclosed. Banks don't take kindly to missed mortgage payments from inmates. Word is, Carl expected to reclaim his throne, only to find the house gone and Ethan crashing in a studio apartment reeking of defeat and instant noodles. Carl's empire collapsed faster than a sandcastle at high tide without his human ATM. Last I heard, he's renting a room from one of his drinking pals and working part-time at a hardware store, with the IRS skimming most of his check. Ethan bounced between couches and shelters before landing a gig at a car wash. His gaming rig was sold to cover court costs, and his dreams of living off his brother's money vanished faster than his online kill streak. The restitution payments keep coming, about $800 a month between them. It's like a cosmic bonus for standing up to bullies. Mark's more than backup, he's my chosen family. When blood relatives showed their true colors, he had my back. We text daily, and he visits every few months to make sure I don't turn into a recluse. His last visit, we were grilling steaks on my deck, beers in hand, when he nailed it. Carl thought he was king of the castle, but he was just a leech. Leeches die without a host. He was right. Carl's whole identity was built on controlling me. When that power vanished, he had nothing. Ethan's identity was even sadder, the golden child who never had to grow up because Daddy always covered for him. Prison and reality hit him like a wrecking ball, but their downfall wasn't the best revenge. My success was. I'm now regional director for my company, overseeing operations across 8 states. The pay's insane, the benefits are wild, and instead of fleeing toxic drama, I'm dating Rachel, the lawyer who crushed Carl's case. Beyond our shared love of legal smackdowns, we clicked. She's got her own career, her own place, and a therapist-approved way of handling toxic relatives. She gets boundaries, respects independence, and never once asked for my bank info or tried to steer my choices. Early on, she said something that stuck. Healthy relationships don't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And for the first time, I'm living that truth. Thank you for watching my story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Stay tuned for more real-life stories, get more experiences.